all set.
Okay, so we will call the meeting to order. Thank everyone for coming in. We switched to virtual for obvious reasons. The governor did reopen the ability to do virtual meetings, and although our school committee meetings will be in person, with this large group with different backgrounds, and quite frankly, with appreciation for the volunteers that are participating, we thought that we would utilize the virtual component of it and keep everybody comfortable. We have, in addition to our typical OPM report, which we will get to, we do have a presentation by Mr. Christopher Kearns. I see Chris is on to discuss renewable energy with the group, something we had looked to do last month, but for obvious reasons, we just couldn't have that. So again, thank everyone for getting on and being here. And I will kick this off to Mr. Kearns, if you want to kind of introduce yourself and take the reins.
Sure.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I have to say, is it Benjamin? That's probably one of the coolest Zoom backgrounds I've seen in a long time on a Zoom meeting. So
well, not everyone cool. Get the reference until recently, now that the new one's just come out.
So that is pretty cool. I'm a big Matrix fan, so that's cool. Thank you for having me. I spoke, I think, with some of you back in December. I don't have a formal PowerPoint presentation because I generally don't like PowerPoints. I'd rather just have a discussion and just kind of walk you through the mechanics of everything that you guys would potentially look at. Sam had reached out to me several months ago about this, and we said, why don't we talk with the school committee about their options? So it seems like you guys are interested in potentially having the school's electricity accounts connected and associated with potential renewable energy systems here in Rhode Island. And there are basically two different programs available to the school district to potentially consider, depending on what your objectives are. One is where you could potentially install solar on the campus, on some of your buildings if they were equipped. And basically you could explore what's known as net metering, again, where you have solar systems installed on some of the school properties, and they are connected to the meters on the school. And there's a program known as the Renewable Energy Fund that Commerce Rhode Island manages. It's a grant program that provides a percentage of a grant that would cover the total installation cost of a possible solar system on the school property. That may be advantageous just in terms of if you have other school funding sources that you could leverage, or through RIDE or federal dollars that could be leveraged, where you could have an on-site school project. The second distinct state program, known as the Virtual Net Metering Program, which a number of school departments and school districts have pursued over the last 3 or 4 years, whether that's K through 12, such as the Charahoe Regional School District, the Exeter West Greenwich Regional School District, the Foster Gloucester School District, the Coventry School Department, or even some of the academia, such as the University of Rhode Island or Rhode Island College, have looked at virtual net metering, which basically allows you guys to have your electricity accounts associated with the solar system in a different part of the state, not necessarily on the campus of the East Providence School Department or the school campus. And basically the way that works is you guys just have your electricity accounts tied to a solar system. You would execute what's known as a net metering credit agreement, ultimately at a reduced rate than what you are currently paying right now to your national grid bills. And I'm assuming you have like a third-party energy supplier agreement separate from your national grid bill. And you would receive a discount rate off of the electricity that you are currently receiving. And the appeal to that program for a number of towns and schools and even the universities is they don't have to own and maintain the system. They don't have to deal with maintenance. They don't have to deal with warranty. They're just getting the electricity savings benefit from a project. without having to deal with the direct turnkey maintenance, any liability and all those things that may entail of a project physically installed on the school property. And the way that we've done this in the past is it's a two-step RFP. So the first step is we would recommend anybody that does a virtual net metering RFP to contract with a qualified clean energy finance consultant. Because you're going to want to have somebody who knows the ins and outs of this program and what the financial offers are being made to score them, to rank them, to evaluate them, and provide recommendations to the school committee in terms of project X with developer A provides the best fiscal savings for the school. These projects are over a 20-25 year term agreement. And then separate from that, you would put out a RFP with the school's electricity accounts in terms of usage, how many accounts that you have, what is the status of your third-party supplier agreement, separate from your national grid bill. And then we also encourage schools and towns to incorporate language that you're looking for potential projects, ideally that are located in disturbed type areas, such as brownfields, landfills, gravel pits, commercial industrial zone lots, and try to minimize or avoid any controversial type locations, such as like undeveloped residential lots that have triggered some local issues with renewable projects. That way you're not dealing with those dynamics as a school committee once an RFP closes. This two-step process we've done with a number of the school districts and school departments over the years. The Clean Energy Finance Consultant RFP. Usually the firm that's selected, the dollar cost for that work to be performed is generally anywhere probably between $15,000 to $25,000, depending on the scope, the number of projects that you potentially get. And what we've structured is that the project RFP, we put a provision in there that says if the school or the town contracts with the renewable energy company, that renewable energy company needs to fully reimburse you guys for the fiscal expense associated with the clean energy finance consultant. So at the end of this, you get the potential savings through your electricity bills, and then you're made whole in terms of reimbursing you for your expense tied to the clean energy finance consultant. That's how we've done that with other towns and cities and schools that have pursued this. Ultimately, you're looking at realistically anywhere from probably an 8 to 12 month endeavor from start to finish with all of this, and that your clean energy finance consultant RFP, ultimately there's a lot of qualified firms, but ultimately it really comes down to a low bid plus qualifications. And then the project RFPs, you'll be score and rank those and then make a determination how you want to proceed. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. We offer technical assistance to the schools, municipalities. So if the school has kind of a boilerplate template RFP procurement document, we would need the relevant energy information from you guys to kind of format this. And then once you guys are potentially good with the RFPs and give the approval for them to potentially be released, we would certainly advertise through our renewable energy listservs to get maximum exposure to your RFPs to attract as many potential bids. I suspect you're going to probably get anywhere between 5 to 10 developers that would submit proposals to you guys for consideration. We are just wrapping up our technical assistance with the town of Smithfield with their electricity accounts. And more earlier, we just wrapped up our work with the town of Foster with their RFP efforts. So if this is something that the school committee is interested in, we are certainly happy to provide technical assistance from the start of this process and be there with you guys through the end to potential executing of agreements.
So Chris, I just want to kind of clarify, and I was under the impression that your conversations with Sam had brought this to light. But so here you have the building committee specifically just for the new high school. So not we're not looking at a school district wide program at this point. This body of of members was looking at the inclusion of renewable energy potentially as being a part of this high school project. The building, and Sam or anyone can speak to it, the building is designed to receive a renewable energy source in some fashion, and we just kind of wanted to hear about the options and benefits or hazards or so forth going forward. And if I missed anything or anyone has anything else to add, please, now's the time.
You would be looking at option one, basically then a net metered installation. And again, the same process. You could structure two RFPs, one to evaluate them, which offers the best fiscal savings. And then the separate project RFP, you would just need to, with that one, you would just have to scope out the property, provide the information about the roof structure, any variables about the property that the developer should be aware of when they submit proposals for a physical installation at the high school property.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Please.
Chris, I guess another option, if we were just focused on the on-site only, is that the owner could embark on their own installation, going through the application process and kind of going through all the mechanics of that, correct? As opposed to going out to a developer. Granted, much more involved by the ownership team, because typically you wouldn't see that expertise kind of with the, the typical design and construction community. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's accurate. I would note that if you're doing a net meter installation, because you're not doing a power purchase agreement, then it just comes down to the total installation cost. So therefore, you wouldn't necessarily need a consultant to evaluate that if you have in-house expertise plus this school committee that could evaluate which one is providing the best fiscal proposal to the school.
Yeah, and I think Chair and committee members, I would say that just based on my experience, kind of on the periphery of this industry and process, in order to probably get a much more robust response, if you were going to go out, say, to the renewable development community, a broader brush, and which may not be appropriate because this is really kind of building focused, but a district-wide discussion would probably yield a better response from the marketplace. If that is complicating because of, this is really just focused on the high school, then that may not be the opportunity that's there. But I think that there might be ways for us to carve this, or kind of create a process that would allow the building still to receive something. You could focus on that, but you could also have a district-wide discussion if it were warranted by the school committee.
Chris?
If I could just add, I forgot to mention something as it relates to that virtual net metering RFP. If the school ultimately wanted to do a demonstration project on the high school as part of an energy savings, but also an academic opportunity, we've also included within the RFPs with the schools an academic requirement, whether that's a scholarship proposal from the developer in terms of an in-kind donation, or a demonstration project where the developer would have a large solar system connected to the East Providence school electricity accounts in another part of the state. But as part of that, you guys require that there be some demonstration installation made on the high school. And that's occurred. One example is the Cherahoe Regional School District. They have I believe their electricity accounts associated with a solar project in Bradford, Rhode Island, in a gravel pit location. Now, Cherahoe installed a ground-mounted solar system in their, I think, recreational field back in the early 2000s. And they made the determination that it was nearing its end of shelf life and it should be replaced. So what we had suggested for their circumstance is they put a provision in the RFP that required that solar system be replaced with a brand new solar system on the campus that could be used as part of their educational curriculum. So there's different ways to go about this, depending on what your overall objectives are. I will note that if the school district broadly is looking for the best fiscal savings, then it's more than likely that they would want to do a virtual net metering to look at the totality of electricity accounts, as you're going to get probably a better long-term fiscal savings for the school than maybe a specific project at the high school location.
Hey, Joel, do you mind if I jump in for a second?
No, please do.
Hey, Chris, this is Nate Cahoon. Actually have the fortune or misfortune, however you see it, to sit on the city council. About a year and a half ago, the city entered into an agreement with an organization called Green LLC. That was a net metering credit sale agreement. The contract, though, was contingent upon the term beginning if Green LLC was able to get a particular energy production facility up and running. Basically, the contract would not begin unless that facility came online. And then there was a one-year sort of trial contract with an option to extend it over a long term, like the kind of term that you were talking about, 20 to 25 years. I've recently inquired into the whether that contract is active. I don't know if that facility ever came up. Because basically, you know, we approved that agreement on the council and then we all went into COVID craziness. So I don't know what the status of that agreement is, if the agreement is still active, whatever. But that agreement was in place for the city, not for the school district, but for the city side of things. I would ask Joel if that is an option that the building committee is going to consider, that net metering option versus an actual physical installation on the school associated with net metering. We should probably find out the status of that on the city side before we went out with any kind of RFP, just to see, you know, as Chris mentioned, is there an ability for us to realize economy through that, et cetera, if that was the option we wanted to go with. So.
And I literally
oops,
sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I literally just had a conversation with recently with Little Compton, between the town of Little Compton and their Little Compton school department. They're interested in putting out an RFP, so we're at the beginning stages of that process. So ultimately, from the state law perspective and those things, because the town and the school, or the city and the school are both eligible for the law. So if that is something that the school and the city council or the town council wanted to look at, that would certainly be permissible under the state law.
So, and Nate, if I remember correctly, I think initially there was a request that the school jump on board with that. And
there was.
And I know we looked at it and there was something about it, not at the time that you guys signed, but because you guys jumped on the second time they came around, the first time they came around, if I remember correctly, something just didn't seem to fit at the time. But that almost sounds like what you described that the city is engaged in sounds like a virtual net, unless I misunderstood, right? Because it sounds like there was an offsite, right? There's an offsite location that they were hoping to have up and running that you would be linked to, but not the one that's at the off Forbes Street.
Yeah, no, the agreement that we entered into was straight net metering. It involved no physical structures on the city of East Providence, no care, maintenance, ownership of any of that. They weren't looking to put, wind or solar panels anywhere in the city. They were looking to leverage their existing stuff to get net metering credits for us.
Right.
And the key distinction is, so it's virtual net metering for a project that is offsite, not necessarily linked to the building where the electricity is. And then net metering is where it's connected to the premise where the utility account is.
And Joel, the only reason I really bring it up is because if I remember the agreement correctly, and I've read it almost 2 years ago now, so I was just looking it up quickly, but if I remember the agreement correctly, it had all sorts of provisions in it whereby if the city and the school department collectively decided they wanted the school to kind of buy into that agreement, there were all sorts of incentives in there. Like I said, I don't even know if it's still active, so I'm trying to find out. But if we were going to look that route, we might try looking there first.
And I think overall, go ahead.
No, I could say always with a small percentage that I'm wrong, but if you combine the school department's electricity accounts with the East Providence, the town's electricity accounts, you're going to get economies of scale, and you're more than likely going to get the best fiscal offer provided to both entities through a procurement.
And you could still have a demonstration project at the school if you wanted to, right, Chris, to your point?
Yeah, trust me, if you guys put out, if the East Providence school in town put out a joint RFP and they put a provision there that says part of this requirement is that you install a demonstration solar project at the new high school campus, no developer is going to blink an eye to include that as part of their package to potentially secure that type of an agreement over a 20-25 year term.
And it sounds like, you know, where this this all started, right, with us looking at the best ways to utilize the budget of this project, right? And we felt, okay, so if we have some available funds and we can make an investment in this new high school that pays dividends down the road, then we wanted to consider that. So it sounds to me that maybe long term, it doesn't make sense to put the capital of the project into a building structure and go more on the lines of along the lines of a combined city school district wide program. Is that what I'm kind of hearing?
Yeah, and possibly still get the same benefit too, Joel, right? Demonstration project on site, efficiency, you know, buying power and getting your power through renewable, you know, a virtual net meter renewable source. So yeah, that may be the outcome, is that the project specific doesn't have it may not be the right path, and therefore you may not need to use the capital available to the project, and you may be able to get an even better outcome with a broader look.
So Nate,
yeah.
Did they actually engage in that?
They did.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they signed the agreement back in like June of 20, Kathy. But
Yeah.
like I said, the start of the term was conditional upon a certain facility coming up to speed by a certain date. I think it was the end of that year. And to be honest with you, I never went back and double checked if it came up or we entered into the term. And I've never seen, you know, I'm not looking at the utility bills for the city, so I don't know if there's any net metering credits rolling in. So I did fire a note off to the mayor and the solicitor tonight, say, well, you know, what's the status of this contract?
Yeah, I do remember going forward with that contract, but then I didn't know whether there was any follow through. Okay.
And ultimately, if the city has executed that agreement and it's tied to a solar system, there's still nothing preventing, because the school district didn't execute as part of that. That you as the school broadly couldn't put out an RFP, get the economies of scale. We'll help you guys draft the RFPs and then put a provision there that there has to be an academic requirement. And if you guys made the determination that you want a demonstration project installed on the high school, then you could put that into the RFP as well.
Yeah, I would even advance, Joel, that if that's something that we're interested in, if this agreement that the city entered into did not ultimately bear fruit, the city might be interested in doing something jointly with the school department along those lines to get that economy of scale, you know, so that's probably
what I was thinking.
Yeah, there's probably some discussion space there.
And what are these, you know, you mentioned a few districts in Rhode Island that are engaged in some type of program. How quickly are they realizing the savings, and to what extent would you say, you know,
yeah,
not to put you on the spot?
Yeah, it's a good question. It ultimately just depends on where the renewable market is with their projects and development. So generally speaking, you're more than what would likely happen is you will, if you put out an RFP, either a joint or just the school itself at some point in Q1 of this year, you're probably going to get 5 to 10 developers submitting project proposals. Some of them may have projects that are ready to be offered to you within, say, 6 months of executing an agreement, whereas some projects are under construction or under development, and you wouldn't start to see a monetary fiscal savings from an agreement until sometime in 2023. It just depends on where each respective developer is with their projects that they have in the queue in different parts of the state. There's also the possibility that a developer has a large system that's operational right now and they have excess credits that they may offer. It's not to say that you could entertain the idea of executing more than one agreement with more than one developer through this solicitation, depending on how large your electricity count load is between whether it's the school or the school and the city combined. But realistically, you shouldn't be surprised if you have offers made to you tied to projects that aren't going to be commercially operational until sometime in 2023 or even 2024 for that matter. It just depends on, again, there are other towns and schools and nonprofits looking at this law, accessing it. So it just depends on where you fall in the queue compared to other entities that are pursuing this program. I hope I've answered that question as best as I could, Joel.
I think so. So you're saying that, you know, obviously they have to have a source up and running in order to put it into action. But at the same time, there's the only out of pocket, it sounds like, unless I missed something, would have been that consultant fee up front.
Yeah. So if you're going to do a virtual net metering project RFP, then we would recommend that you put out a separate RFP to contract with a clean energy finance consultant, because they're going to want to have to evaluate the net metering credit offers that are made to you, carry out the analysis over a 20-25 year period, and then have to rank those projects and associated developers. But also you want that consultant to really dive into, okay, if the school in the town or the city executes an agreement with this developer, where does that project stand in terms of local permitting within that town that it's being built? What is the status of the national grid interconnection studies? Does the project location have any DOT or DEM permitting matters that still need to be resolved? So they're going to look at both the fiscal offers to the school, but also where are those projects in the queue in terms of milestones met? And that's where you want a consultant in your corner evaluating these things on your behalf. And then if and when you guys sign an agreement with one developer or multiple developers, those developers reimburse you for that fiscal expense that you incur with that clean energy consultant, likely over a 3 to 6 month period that they would be contracted for to carry out this work for you guys.
And am I understanding that the risk and one of the risks is contracting with maybe as you talk about all of the different factors as far as location and so forth that a developer may be looking to set up shop, so to speak, would be this consultant would basically check the viability of their project as to whether or not it'll actually get off the ground before we lock in.
So there's always a dynamic that while you guys have an RFP, another town or a school has an RFP, and who signs first. So that's always just the nature of the beast with these procurements, and there's just because there's multiple ones out there. I can't recall that situation arising in any RFP that I've been involved with the school over the last 2 or 3 years. Generally, when the project RFP closes, that fiscal offer and those projects are generally valid for 60 to 90 days by the developers. And then you can ask for extensions, and that certainly can happen. Because at the end of the day, most of these developers are going to do their best not to have to walk away from what they offer to you guys, because of probably your size of your electricity accounts and the opportunity that presents. I would say ultimately the risk for you guys is your time that you put into this. Again, OER is happy to assist the town or the school or a combination in structuring these 2 RFPs and advertising them. Your only real fiscal risk is, say you get project proposals and say it's June of 2022, and for some reason you decide to not proceed with the project, then you would be on the hook for that fiscal expense expended on that clean energy finance consultant over the previous 6 months. I can't recall ever accounting that before, where we've done all this and the school or an entity doesn't pull the trigger on executing an agreement.
Well, East Providence probably would have been your first encounter with that, because that's exactly what happened about 3 or 4 years ago. The school department and the city couldn't really come to terms. The school department was not really involved with the development of, the early stages of the solicitation, and the school department really didn't, or at least the school committee on which I was sitting then, didn't collectively buy what was being pitched. So, the city wound up executing its own agreement, and that's the agreement I was just referencing earlier.
Full disclosure, OER wasn't involved with that RFP, and I don't know anything about the RFP or the history of that process.
No, I've never heard your name before, so.
For better or for worse.
Thanks, Sam.
Better for him.
Yeah.
No, but I do remember that, Nate, that's what it was with, the city had done a lot of work behind the scenes. And then after they were ready to, sign on the line, they came to us and said, oh, hey, by the way, we're about to do this, jump on board.
Put your name here.
Yeah. So
as it relates to the 2 RFPs, I will say the Clean Energy Finance Consultant RFP, I basically, it's 3 or 4 page RFP. You basically say, here's what we're looking to have done. Here's the timeline. Please provide your qualifications. We generally put that RFP on the street for 2 or 3 weeks, because again, there's probably 3 to 5 consultants that are going to bid on the work, some located in Rhode Island, some located either in Connecticut or Massachusetts. All are qualified companies. And then we would work with you guys and the city or just the school on the separate RFP for the project proposals and structure all that. You put that on the streets for generally 5 to 6 weeks, including a Q&A comment period in case you get any questions. We're certainly happy to help if you get any questions tied to the state policies and laws and helping you guys prepare responses on those. And then ideally you would contract with your clean energy finance consultant. And then by the time your project RFP closes, you're in a position to then send those proposals to your clean energy finance consultant that would then begin their evaluation, questions that they want to post to developers for your bid meetings, ranking them and all those type of things over, a several week period.
That was the mayor on the phone. Wanting to know going distance learning tomorrow like a snow day.
Well, I was hoping he was calling you about the green contract, but I guess not.
No. He's more interested right now in school. So Chris, help me understand. Is OER, you would or would not bid on that consultant?
No, we're a state agency, so no, we would just give you guys the technical assistance and give you feedback on your RFPs if you've checked all the boxes. And then if and when you approve your RFPs and they're publicly posted on your school website or your procurement website, we would be happy to distribute them to our renewable email listserv to attract broad attention to it. And then from there, we would just wait to see what you guys get for proposals. But I would venture to guess you're probably going to get 3 to 5 clean energy finance consultants that want to bid on the work for that specific RFP. And then the project RFP itself, venture to guess 5 to 10 developers submitting proposals, maybe a little bit higher, depending on where developers are with projects in the state. But 5 to 10 is on average what we see other towns or schools get once RFPs close.
Any questions from members of the building committee?
Joel, if I could ask a question.
Please.
Regarding the virtual net metering, we've already expended some funds to have our building constructed with a roof that's solar ready, anticipating the use of solar energy. Would it be possible in that RFP to include such terminology that, that any demonstration project would have to be a substantial demonstration project? Because if we're prepared to accept a solar load, why not take advantage of as much of it as possible rather than some tiny, there are all types of demonstration.
Yep.
We'd want to I think, I personally would like to see a substantial demonstration project. Would that be a potential add-on to that RFP?
Absolutely. I mean, you could structure, I mean, at the end of the day, the beauty is the school can structure the RFP however they want, and then the market will respond to whether or not they can do it. And you could structure basically saying, look, a majority of our load is going to be located with a project not located on the school. However, as part of that V&M agreement, we want to deploy solar on our rooftop that was installed with the intent to put solar on it as well. The question that you guys would need to just, or I don't know if you know this, but when you were doing the structure of the roof and everything, did you ever get an indication of what scale solar could be installed on the roof? Like a 50 kW, 100 kilowatt solar system?
No, but Chris, I think we could talk with the architecture firm and see kind of what they thought the capacity was. Just because we had to do some conceptual sizing just from a structural load and kind of where to put the connectivity down to the electrical room and all that.
Gotcha. And well, the beauty is that the solar market will be able to size out a system. You just give them the address and the roof and the location, and they'll be able to spec out what they think their company can do on it in terms of taking into account shading and all those things. If there's any other roof structures that may interfere with the shading on the rooftop and stuff like that. So certainly we could structure an RFP where, again, a majority of your load would probably be located off-site. But if you wanted to maximize the rooftop to the greatest extent possible, you could put that within the RFP, and we see what you guys get for responses from the market.
Thank you. That answered my question. Thanks. Thank you very much.
Sam? Go ahead, Steve.
I just have a quick question. Sam, when we talk about this building being solar ready, there's different levels of being solar ready. We have pathways to a roof, but I don't think we have much more than that. Right? I mean, we don't have panels put in. We just have the ability to run pathways to the roof. So
correct. We have conduit up to the roof. Ready. We have room in the electrical room, and we have the structural analysis up to a certain load.
Right. So typically, I think they add about 10 pounds a square foot to accommodate for solar, from what I can remember. But solar ready is kind of a bit of a pitfall there, because we have pathways to get there. We don't have panels. We don't have a lot of the stuff that we need for this building to be solar ready, other than the fact we don't have to cut holes to get from the electric room to the roof. That's as solar ready as this building is, and the fact that we have a roof to support it. So there's a big jump that has to happen to get between those two. So I just want to make sure that, I mean, this is a significant add to this building.
Hey, Steve.
Yes.
Does that big jump that you just described, does that require a lot of architectural work?
No, and that's the nice part about it being solar ready, is we have pathways, we have conduits, we have, as Sam says, we have places in the electrical room for these panels to be mounted, which is great, because if we didn't do that during design, we'd be like, where are we putting all these panels? And how are we going to get to the roof? So that was great that was all built in. I just want everybody to understand that there's no electrical components for solar in this building. There's just pathways and spaces, and it was great planning, and I'm glad that we did it. But we just need to know that when this happens, it's a big number. I mean, there's a lot of wiring that has to be put in, but how much that gets rebated, and what kind of programs are available, and how much of those costs can be offset, and how much we can sell back to the grid, are all things that Chris can help us with. And the roof is huge too. Knowing that we wanted to put solar up there, added extra pounds per square foot to the design for the roof and all of that, so that we can just come in. And from my understanding is solar is getting lighter and lighter as the years go by. These systems used to be big and bulky, and they're starting to be brought down. They're smaller. There's even ones you can roll out on the roof. I don't know if those are even viable at this point.
Yeah. So ultimately, if again, with that additional information, what we would suggest is just include a mandatory site walkthrough of the property as part of the RFP. So that way developers can go to the location, talk with the building officials, talk with the architects, and we could you can incorporate that into the project RFP.
And I would also, my thought is that if you're looking at virtual, right, the upside to virtual is less of a maintenance concern long term, right? With equipment that either you're responsible for or at least a location that it sits upon. So if we maximize that, you know, if we have something up on the roof, to me, anything up on that roof creates also, risk for the roof itself or any maintenance that's associated with it. Sam, you can, tell me if I'm off kilter, but I'm thinking, we start mounting in too many spaces and, between roof warranties or anything else like that, there's got to be a factor that comes into play with that.
Yeah, there certainly is. And, if you do it as a lease, obviously that's an arrangement you're entering into with that developer. So yeah, I mean, I think all those things would have to be evaluated to see how does the building want this to be there, does it or doesn't it? And then the district and the city also thinking about those arrangements, whether physical or completely virtual, would be all the things. I think that those are policy discussions that happen, I think, at the two governing bodies to then decide how you would take the next step.
We're keeping in mind what Manny said, to maximize from an educational standpoint, if we can have that that component, there's huge value there. We don't want to be short-sighted, when we seek out those options either. So
the academic component has been, I think, in all of our RFPs that we've issued or been providing technical assistance with school districts or school departments, I think going back to 2017, 2018. So we've always had an academic piece, whether that was a demonstration project or another tuition type program or something like that. It's always been part of these RFPs. The other only thing I would flag is if the school wants to do something, and again, I don't even know what the rules are, but just in terms of permitting at the local level, do you guys have to go through zoning planning for a hypothetical rooftop solar project, or are you guys exempt from local building and zoning permit? It's just one of those things that the developers would ask, just to be aware of the rules.
We would not be exempt.
And does East Providence have a solar ordinance in place that defines what the rules process is for rooftop solar installations?
Not that I know of. We can research that and find out, but certainly none that's been done recently.
Okay. And that's a question the developers would naturally ask is, if they're going to do a virtual net meter project with part of it potentially coming on the rooftop at the school, what is the permitting process? Is it a special, would it just be a special use permit? That would probably be an important element to have addressed before any hypothetical RFP is issued.
Got it.
So Nate, you're going to find out where the city is on that prior agreement. I'm thinking again, if there's economies of scale, an opportunity there to do an all-encompassing, maybe that makes sense. If I don't know, that's just my thought right now. That might be a smart way to go about things.
Yeah, I would agree. So let me look into that. And I'm also going to look at all that other stuff that Chris just brought up about zoning, permitting, special use ordinances, et cetera.
Thoughts? I don't know if on that approach, if the city's no longer engaged in an agreement, Does anyone else have any opinions or thoughts on that approach to look at a combined investigation?
I think that's a good idea combined. It sounds like it'd be more fruitful for everybody. If they haven't got the deal already, Joel.
Right.
Mm.
And I'm happy to come back, whether it's before this group or a joint thing between the school and the city. You know, I'm happy to come back virtually or in person if needed.
Joel, if
Andy,
they don't have it, this gives us the chance. So I said, if they don't have it, this gives us a chance to be involved from day one instead of coming in and, you know, getting it dropped in our lap and not having the time to be able to do any of the research. It would be nice if they don't have it to just get on board.
And since we haven't heard anything and the mayor hasn't been asked about anything, I'm thinking they don't, Nate. I don't know what might have happened to it.
That it was very specific because the council was kind of lukewarm about it. So we put in some very specific provisions that prevented us from getting locked into a 25-year term without certain conditions being met. I don't know that they were ever met. So
Okay, maybe that's the case.
Any thoughts on that, Manny?
I think, you know, the combination with the city, the scale would increase the number of opportunities you'd have. I think your potential bidders would increase and they'd sharpen their pencils. You've got two big customers. I'm sure, Chris, you've probably seen examples of communities that have just gone school side, others have just gone town or city, and those that have gone combined. What's the experience that you've seen there?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, over the last 4 or 5 years, most of this has either been the school department or the school district and then the town separately. I believe maybe Barrington did this jointly back, I think, in 2016, 2017. But I think like most, again, like the Westerly School Department, Charahoe, Coventry, Exeter, Foster, usually they go their own ways. But again, the reality is you're going to get economies of scale if you do a joint venture. And, you know, generally what prevents it from happening is, you know, we experience all the times in terms of silos, either the lack of communication or just local politics, personalities just don't allow that type of effort to occur. So if East Providence hasn't executed an agreement, then it's probably worthwhile to at least try to do something jointly, again, just to get the economies of scale that's going to benefit both the school and the municipality.
Chris, would you say in the last 5 years, the number of respondents to these RFPs has increased significantly?
I would say it's been pretty steady, probably over the last 2.5, 3 years, just in terms of when these RFPs go out. Again, you're usually looking at that 5 to 10 range in terms of developers that respond to the proposals. It can go up, it can go down. Sometimes you may get more than 10. It just depends on how many developers become aware of the RFP and if they all have projects and associated capacity to offer to off-takers. Again, this program's been around in Rhode Island for just over 10 years now, and a lot of municipalities have accessed it. A lot of schools have accessed it over the last 4 or 5 years. So it's certainly a mature market in terms of developers are pretty prepared to respond to these RFPs when they come on the street.
I'm just thinking, or at least hoping, maybe a little more aggressively than we would have seen a few years back.
Again, it depends. Ultimately, a lot of times it potentially depends on your electricity load and how big it is to potentially attract developers. But again, because the program has been around for over 10 years, the number of still available customers to potentially subscribe to off-taker agreements potentially is not as high as it was 4 or 5 years ago. So for a a joint effort between the school and the broader municipality to pop up will certainly trigger some large interest. And again, I would be surprised at minimum if you didn't at least get half a dozen bidders that submit proposals into this.
So Chris, what would be the next step for us besides Nate introducing it to the city?
Yeah, so the things that you would need to figure out or gather, one is what is your total electricity usage in terms of total kilowatt hours? Mm-hmm. I would suspect that you would want to prepare the numbers based upon calendar years 2019, 2020, and 2021 to date, just so the developers can see what the usage was pre and post COVID to the location. You'll want to disclose, do you have a third-party supplier agreement in terms of your energy supply charge on your utility bills? A lot of schools and municipalities get their national grid bill, and then they get a third-party supplier agreement. Some have it through the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns contract agreement. So you want to gather that information. You'll also need to identify how many national grid accounts you have with the school, because the developers are going to need to know how many accounts that are collectively total on the property. You want to disclose what your annual electricity costs, expenditures are. And again, I would base that on 2019, 2020, and 2021. As it relates to the rooftop on the campus that you guys have discussed, you're going to want to disclose all the aspects in terms of the weight restrictions, any criteria, what are the warranties on the rooftop, anything that you think the developers should know about that physical footprint for them to be aware of. So those would be all the things that you would want to gather for the project RFP. Again, the Clean Energy Finance Consultant RFP, I can just kind of pull up one that we've done with other schools or towns and just update it to reflect East Providence. Because again, you're just looking for basically give us your cost to do the work over a certain period and provide your qualifications. And then the school committee can evaluate those and make a selection. But those are really the next steps. And then ultimately, if you guys decide to issue an RFP or with East Providence, again, I just have expectations that this entire process from start to finish between issuing the RFP to signing with a renewable developer or more than one developer, you're probably looking at an 8 to 12 month process.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just I was on mute. I was going to say, can I piggyback on that real quick? With regard to the kilowatt hour usage over 19, 20, 21, we might want to extend that into 17 and 18, given that the construction project on the high school was happening substantially in 19 and 20. And that's probably going to skew our numbers. We had 2 facilities up and running, et cetera, et cetera. 17 and 18 might give us a more stable picture.
More data that you can provide the industry gives you more accurate proposals from the industry. So if you can include 17 and 18, and then I would also just go to the your annual energy expenditures, also show what it was in 2017 and 2018 as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
All right. There's no other questions. I guess we've got some conversations to have, Nate. We can kind of talk about next steps with Kathy and Craig and the mayor and Malcolm, and again, depending on where the city is. Mm-hmm. If the city's still engaged, or if that contract has kicked off, then at least Kathy, we'll know as a district where we can the next steps, and let Chris know from there which way we're going to go. But I think again, it makes sense that we do this not so much as a piece of this project, but as a district.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Chris, you're free to hang around if you have nothing else to do, but otherwise, thank you very much.
Have a good night, guys. We'll talk soon.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, you too.
Thank you.
And Sam, thanks for setting that up. Again, a lot to chew on, but definitely answered quite a bit of questions. You're up with the OPM report.
Great. Ben, if I can just share.
Actually, 1 second. Is there anything from the committee? I didn't want to cut anybody short. Did anybody have any other comments on that before we switch gears?
I really don't think we did anything with that goal.
Yeah.
I really don't think so. I don't think there was follow through on that. So we'll check on that first thing for you. Okay, that's it. Go ahead.
Great. I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see the report? I believe this was distributed yesterday by Sharon. I'll be efficient given that we just spent an hour on that discussion. Just as far as kind of our recurring updates, our TCO expires at the end of this month, the 1st of February. If you guys recall, we had a couple outstanding items that were the main kind of hurdles to get through that. Also, I think it was probably back in November or December, we did hear from the AHJ, the building department, that they were basically going to keep the TCO open until we achieve the final site improvements, which are, are scheduled for the fall. So what Gilbane has been doing has been tackling the key elements that were part of the original TCO, and really the integration of all the security notification systems. Those were the last piece left. And Gilbane is on kind of pace to have the final inspections for that activity and those issues signed off by the end of the month. We are pretty much in constant communication with Gilbane on the timing of that. And I think right now they are working with Jim Bellamy and team at the city, at the fire department, to schedule those final inspections and basically have it clear by Feb 1. It will still be open until we get to that final step of the site improvements, which will then allow all the parking requirements to be met, all the ADA access, parking spaces, all that kind of stuff. So what we will be seeing is that extension through that date, but again, with those major items taken off the list and really just the final site improvements to be the last thing out there. Commissioning, the team continues to work both with Stephen Turner Inc. as well as really Delta as one of the main vendors out there. I think I think we've knocked down all the kind of the occupant issues that would have been happening back in the fall, with kind of comfort, too hot, too cold as we've gotten into the winter months. So I believe that between Chris and Bill Black and the OPM team and the Gilbane team, we've continued to kind of make sure that those issues have been satisfied while the commissioning team wraps up the remainder of their testing, evaluation, and any kind of punch list items that they have with any of the systems out there. FF&E and technology. This is actually a little bit inaccurate. We know that there's actually still 4 shelves missing from the library. And I think, that's probably the last piece that's going on in there. And then if there's any additional kind of coordination on FF&E and technology issues that, Ben and team continue to work on their side. And I know that Craig continues to work on just kind of trying to complete and shut down that list of any remaining items that might still be going through a purchasing process on the FF&E side. Project Milestones, you'll notice that the needle is starting to move a little bit slower. We've probably only seen about 1.5% completion increase since last month, and that's really has a lot to do with, obviously the bulk of the work was done with the building. A lot of that work has now been billed and has been kind of cleared through the requisition process and the work in place on site. And now what we're seeing is a slower incremental, especially over the winter, kind of pace of the remaining dollars that are going to get drawn down at least until probably March and April. And then we'll see that final spike as we kind of go from, the early spring all the way through the summer into the early fall from a work in place and a invoiced standpoint. Gilbane did spend a fair amount of time in the building over the Christmas break. trying to get some of the larger items taken care of. There are still several out there that need to be continuously worked on. You know, a couple big items out there. Vinyl graphics still remain a coordination item in the gymnasium, in the fitness room, and in some of the hallways, not only for new vinyl graphics, but us going through and evaluating the quality and the condition of the existing vinyl graphics, and then going back with the vendors and ensuring that those are going to get installed to the standard that is acceptable for the district. Like we mentioned, commissioning ongoing. Phase 2 site work, we'll talk about in a minute with some of the images that we included here. And then our MWB participation, again, this is not moved because it's based on our commitments to date against our total anticipated project value. So I think we will still see this number kind of fluctuate, you know, as we close out all the project over the next 8 to 12 months. The site team, as folks have seen, have still been active out there. Got a little bit more challenging with the snowstorm that we got at the end of last week. But DeGregory and their subs are continuing to do a fair amount of the site work, as folks I think can see and realize. And that's going to continue as long as the ground will allow it and the weather will allow it. You know, we always anticipated that we were going to see the slowdown coming up, especially with the cold weather coming, frost getting deeper. That's going to impact their ability to kind of be effective out there without a lot of different means and methods that could add cost to the overall project. So we continue to monitor that on a daily basis with them and with their subcontractors. A request at between the last meeting and this meeting was just to provide some imagery of what the proposed condition was going to be, especially in the front, you know, the western half of the property. So we included this just as a reminder, a refresher for the school building committee. These are renderings that were established before we even started construction. So they're a little bit out of date, but I think the overall intent is there, and really that was the goal, so that folks could kind of, I think, remind themselves of what the configuration is going to be of this kind of almost 50% of the project site, from, you know, that access road that's in place now where my cursor is, where really everything else has yet to be developed. But we are seeing those, you know, all those components really start to come into, you know, physical shape out on the site. So just scrolling through these are some of the, you know, the fly-through images that we had. Again, not perfect to the exact final condition, but I think a good representation of what we're going to be able to start to see out there as the spring starts to break. And again, you see a lot of these structures, the foundations for these structures are actually starting to come into place, that we'll see in a moment. And you can see that here, you know, obviously a lot of this tied to the athletic components of the front, retaining walls. This is your future roadway that'll be coming down here that sits significantly higher than the actual field. This is the baseball, the edge of the turf, you know, the curb that goes in, similar to what went in for the stadium field. So you'll see a lot of that activity again, as weather has allowed for them to continue to do foundation work, footing work for any of these major components out here. And I think it's, you know, for folks that see it on a regular basis or even an irregular basis, you can really start to see the shape of kind of this final condition that we're going to have out here. So it's pretty exciting. Musco lighting has gone up, you know, in the last week or so. So you're starting to see those major components, especially around the two fields on either side of the street. So that gives it a lot more definition to what's going on out there. And then there has been just kind of the ongoing punch list and finalization of some of that scope that was not completed in September. So that work continues inside the building that we see here in some of these images, mostly focused in the gym, the fitness center, and some of that those areas on that northern end of the building. Financial update. So what we see here, and when we look at it compared to our you know, our actual budget update, is that, you know, usually there's been a fairly large discrepancy between what Eric is projecting with these projected numbers and where our contingency balances. We're actually seeing those start to level out and get a little bit closer as change orders are being processed. We're still waiting on the big change order that we talked about last month. It was the credits for, you know, a lot of these, you know, allowances that got reconciled back, the abatement credits that we talked about at our last meeting, as well as what the cost is of the clock tower. So while those have not hit yet, what you're seeing is these numbers are starting to get a little bit closer to our value because they are pending now and about to be, you know, incorporated into the budget for next month's update. So we'll see these numbers continue to move. Construction contingency, as expected and as discussed with this group, continues to get drawn down by the CM. Again, with our full review and you know, an approval process that happens on that weekly basis. And then allowances continue to get kind of reallocated, or in some instances that we'll see in this next change order are actually going to get credited back to the owner. So the owner is going to see a deduct on the overall contract value, and those dollars will be able to flow back into your construction contingency line item. So overall project budget update, you know, as we now are in the kind of the T minus 12 months of updates and kind of budget draw requisition processes that we're going through. We did have another relatively small OCO that came through last month, OCO 15. And then again, what you're seeing is a much slower move on these percentages of completion. I think last month, the construction, we were at 84 build, and we were at 82 overall complete. So we're really moving at a much slower pace right now. And again, it'll pick up in the spring, and then kind of start to get on a little bit more of a clip. Still $32 million to draw down, assuming that you draw down on all these line items, which we don't expect that we will. So there's still a fair amount of work, especially in the construction side, totaling at almost 29 million that we will be putting through in the next 12 months, again, with that kind of bell curve that we saw during the building construction. And then change order update, again, OCO 015 for that ATP that came through last month. Next month, we will see OCO 0016, which will incorporate a lot of those credits as well as the clock tower into that one number that we'll be able to share and talk through the group as needed. That concludes the report. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the committee?
I don't have any questions, but I think it's impressive now when you go down Pawtucket Avenue and you see all of the light posts. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's starting to take shape even more. And Nate, thanks for asking for that. You know, the depiction of the west side of the campus. Those questions. I know I've been hit with a few of them, and there's a lot of things, you know, going around, people concerned about parking as much as we go through it. So I like that it shows how the fields will lay, and again, reinforcing the fact that we have more parking here than the previous campus had in total. So
yeah, I had completely forgotten the layout. I had it backwards. I had the baseball and the softball fields reversed in my head, and somebody had asked me about it. I said, wait, no, I'm not right. So let me take another look.
All right. Further questions? I'll entertain a motion to accept the OPM report.
Move to accept.
Motion by Mr. Enos. Do we have a second by Mr. Amoroso? Beach out, Tony.
Fine.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Aye. All right. Motion carries. Consider and vote to approve invoices for services. Mr. Enos, you are up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. AI3 Basic Services, $29,484.68. Gilbane Building Company, $1,248,177.50. National Grid, $5,944.39. Peregrine Group, LLC, $59,000. Stephen Turner, Inc., $8,486.35. And Filch Engineering, $1,040 for a total of construction invoices for $1,352,132.92.
Move to accept.
Motion by Superintendent Crowley to accept. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Vinatiero. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Moving on to the furniture, fixtures, equipment, and technology. B&H Photo, $15,497.19. Block, $3,781.38. Certified Connections, $3,396.84. Custom Computer Specialist, $17,840. Dell, $17,458. Monitor Equipment, Inc., $9,961. Newark, $12,736.80. NextGen, $3,265.30. Norfolk Power Equipment, $15,540.84. Northeast Beverage, $1,850. Portland Pottery, $4,666.64. Robert H. Lord, $18,296.50. Sergeant Welch, $15.01. School Furnishings, $9,248.87. Uline, $4,200.30. WB Mason, $154,053.21. And Woodcraft Supply Inc., $890.26 for a total of $292,698.14.
Motion by Superintendent Crowley to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Piola. Traded off. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Craig, any more money that you want? Or is that it?
I'm good for tonight. Thank you very much.
You're good. All right. Next, we have consider and vote to approve the minutes of December 13th, 2021.
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Enos.
Second.
Second by Mr. Vinatiero. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. That puts our next meeting. We have the 7th, is that correct? No.
Yep. Because
Yeah.
don't we have a school committee on the 8th?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
So February 7th. You have any conflicts, any issues with that?
Nope.
Okay, we'll kind of play it by ear. We'll see how things are going COVID-wise. So it may or may not be virtual. We'll see what the governor allows. That gets extended for virtual. But I like being in person, but I also like everyone feeling comfortable and being included. So we have February 7th for next meeting.
Okay.
So with that, if there's any other comments, questions? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Superintendent Crowley. Do you have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Amoroso. He beat you, Craig. You can't get the money and the motion.
It doesn't matter.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries, but I do, and I should have done this before, I want to welcome Principal Black to the building committee. And actually, Sharon, we have to remember, I think on next school committee to update the building committee roster for approval so that we can have Mr. Black on record with RIDE as being part of the building committee.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
Yeah, well, happy to have you. All right, and congrats.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Have a great night.
Stay safe, everyone. Bye.